So let's take a look now. We've already looked at these 6 explanations that are based on a philosophically natural worldview, and now we're turning the corner to the Christian explanation, the one that is supernatural. And that is simply that the disciples accurately reported the resurrection of Jesus, what they saw. They were accurate in their description. They weren't wrong or lying or delusional or fooled or influenced, or they didn't distort the story over time. They simply saw something and they accurately reported what they saw. Now, remember, I started off by telling you that every explanation you have for any crime or any explanation you have for any set of facts is going to have strengths and going to have weaknesses. Every one of the explanations I've offered so far, the first 6 that I've ruled out, they did have some strengths. It's just the problem is they have some deal-killing weaknesses. Well, even this explanation, the Christian explanation at the bottom of the list, has strengths and weaknesses, and we need to be very upfront about that. Look, the strengths are obvious, right? This explanation, the Christian explanation, actually explains the 4 minimal pieces of evidence that I would have told you as an atheist I could affirm. This is what I said. Okay, you could hold to these 4 facts, yet still deny Christianity was true. And that was me. I held that these 4 things might still be true, yet Christianity is false. And the Christian explanation does make sense of all of this, right? Because if it really happened, then this is what you would see. But there was for me at that time, a deal-killing liability, a weakness in this explanation. And here's the weakness. The weakness is that it requires a resurrection, okay? And I would have said, as a philosophically natural examiner of facts, I would have said, no, there's no way. Any history that includes miracle, that's like a genre issue, right? It's no longer, you're not doing history anymore. If you're including miracles as part of your explanation, now you're doing mythology. And I would have rejected this claim only because it requires a belief in this supernatural resurrection. But stop for a second. Let's just be honest about what the entire investigation we've been doing over the last several sessions, the investigation of the resurrection. What are we really examining? What is the chief issue we're examining? Isn't it this issue? Are supernatural events like a resurrection, could they ever be included as a reasonable explanation? Or are they just ruled out by their very nature from the get-go? I would have said, well, yeah, you got to rule them out. Well, no, that's what we're investigating. This is the question under examination. You cannot begin by thinking you have an answer to this question. You have to suspend whatever your doubts are so you can examine this question fairly. Because if you don't do that, well, I can show you some piece of evidence. I can show you how early these are written. You'll find a way or a reason to jump over that explanation because you're already committed to the answer. You're like, I don't care. I don't believe in the supernatural. Okay, let me show you something else. Let me show you, for example, how early they're quoted by the students of the eyewitness. I don't care. You'll jump over that because you'll say, I don't believe in supernatural events like a resurrection. I just don't ever accept that. And then no matter what I show you over time, you will find some reason to jump over it. And the reason why you're doing that, and the reason why you're ending up with this conclusion that this is not reasonable, is because that's where you started. And you simply refuse to move. And there is the dilemma, because this form of reasoning where you just will affirm yourself over and over again and deny any explanation because you want to get where it was you started to begin with, that is not a good way to run an investigation. Why do you think I started by showing you this nightstand? It wasn't just so I have a good cop story. Those officers walked in thinking they knew the explanation before they started. And as a result, they ended up where they started. They didn't even bother to look for any new information. They didn't pull down the covers, and they made an errant inference because they thought this is the first rule of investigations. Don't be a know-it-all. Don't think you know. Leave yourself open. Look, let's put it this way. Imagine you're looking at these 2 options. What happened to Jesus? Well, there's only 2 explanations. Either he rose from the dead or he didn't. That's it. Now, there's 2 ways you can go here. I would have said, well, look, the only way I can get to the left is if I'm willing to accept and examine and at least investigate all explanations, including the supernatural ones, right? Because this would clearly be a supernatural event if he rose from the dead. So I'd have to examine, no. I would have said, can't do that because I don't believe in the supernatural. That's a roadblock for me. There's no way I could ever get to that inference because I would have rejected anything supernatural by way of explanation. Now, the other way, I could, if I'm only going to look at natural explanations for these claims related to the resurrection, well, I tried all that. I mean, the problem is every one of those explanations is itself a roadblock because it doesn't work. And I wouldn't have cared. I would have said, I'll just jump over those one at a time, or I'll move around them, or I'll dig underneath them, because I was committed to getting to that conclusion that Jesus did not rise from the dead. Now, just take a look at this illustration for a second. Okay, which of these two sides is less encumbered? I mean, it's clearly the left. And by the way, that roadblock that's on the left path, I put that there. It doesn't need to be there. That's my bias against the supernatural. I could easily pull it down. Now, I would have said, nope, I'm not going to pull that down because I don't believe in anything supernatural. Really, that's a bias. It turns out that explanation, it only has one liability: your presuppositional bias against the supernatural. And this is where the work I did earlier, and the reason why I went through that entire process with you, talking about the evidence for God. At some point, it dawned on me, as somebody who believed in Big Bang cosmology, raised in that Star Trek generation, first generation of Star Trek, right? We thought we were on the moon before 1971, and we were basically thinking we might, who knows what we would conquer every scientific question we would be able to answer. And I would believed that the science, because the science does, point to the standard cosmological model that all space, time, and matter came into existence from nothing. That was my belief, based on the scientific evidence. But that means there's already something outside of the natural realm, which is just space, time, and matter. Because whatever it is that causes all space, time, and matter to come into existence cannot be spatial, temporal, or material. There's the problem. I already believed there was something outside of the natural realm that was the cause of the natural realm. Now, if that cause is a supernatural being rather than an impersonal force, that changes everything, right? I mean, if there's a being who if that's that powerful, then the biggest miracle in the history of miracles is not in the New Testament at all. It's in Genesis 1. Everything from nothing. If there's a being that can do everything from nothing, then walking on water, that's small potato stuff. And I realized if I'm already there, if I already believe that there is something this powerful, that I need to be fair and drop my bias against supernatural explanations, at least long enough to look at which explanation has the least liabilities. If that's the only liability, it seems to me that the clear path to a decision was standing right in front of me the entire time. And all along, the only thing that ever stood between me and the reasonable inference of the resurrection was me. And that's why, in the end, of all the 7 ways you might explain the resurrection using abductive reasoning, which is what we do in every death scene to determine if a death scene is a crime scene, I came to the conclusion that I had been really holding this bias against the supernatural for undue cause, given that I already accepted the standard cosmological model. And that's what opened the door for me to see it for what it really was, the most reasonable explanation given the evidence.